There is nothing beyond the horizon, nor a dawn to come. You know the scourge I send upon your lands, my plagues and storms and endless war fed by your own dead. Dead that return year after year, century after century, regardless of how you dispose of their remains. You cannot break my chains on their souls. I do not gloat. I am not blind to the horrors I unleash. It is time you understand the purpose of your torment. No longer do I possess a body as you know it, but I was mortal once. I'll not delve into details of my time serving in my father's empire. I obeyed, mitigated where possible, but to keep my sanity, I destroyed my humanity. Before it decayed completely, I escaped. I spent decades and sacrificed countless lives and annihilated entire civilizations to succeed. Yet I broke free. Permanent escape was impossible. Death might not have been enough distance. It was a soul haunting me for burning their kingdom and salting their soil that began my journey of emancipation. The haunting spirit showed me lives I had destroyed, one life every night for years. Every morning the same whisper that redemption would never grace me. It rekindled the sympathy, empathy, and compassion I had smothered in my youth. While it reignited some good within, my excavation went too deep for too long. I feel no sorrow for those I've killed. Death is a simple and merciful end. Minimal as my rebirth was, any amount of decency calls for the destruction of the empire I helped build. Not something I could do from within, nor something any army in the world could accomplish. My rebellion began with one of the most intriguing magics I have ever seen, the ability to see into the future. A woman brought to me as a gift, but she knew of the spirit. She knew of the growing discomfort at the excesses of my family. Her predictions of the future never failed, and when I heeded her advice, fortune always favored me. Proof of the soul beyond flesh and an oracle to ensure might and victory, I held secrets that would have elevated me to the Emperor's right hand. For all my power, the forces of might and law and magic, every act, every word was one of service. My will but an extension for the Emperor's intent, my blood and loyalty the only reason they were bestowed upon me. Only then, when I wondered if I had power enough for choice, did the Oracle fulfill her purpose in coming to me and reveal the paths ahead. Continued service to my father would elevate my position, but the deeds entrusted to it, the scrutiny of it, and my undeniable growing sense of decency would end in inane insanity. I did not need prophecy to know the outcome. The Emperor puts his faithless and useless children into a gallery of torture, kept alive as an example for the rest. My only choice to be free was to destroy the Empire. An empire I helped build on genocide. An empire held together by a so far immortal emperor and the longevity and loyalty of his children. To succeed, I need only depart on a journey across the world to discover the roots of magic. Mastery of reality's fabric, my only key to freedom. My father's power was no small thing. Ironic, my people's magic gave me the time and vitality to destroy them. I chose freedom. The Oracle guided me toward opportunity. Conquest of an island nation as a forward base for a larger invasion was a simple mission to acquire. She died with every other soul in the fleet when it sank. It is difficult to find a people that can breathe water, and sink invading ships days from land with no warning. I washed ashore, somewhere, my only companion, the soul tormenting me with goodness. Much to its chagrin, it became my moral guide. All my instincts had to be ignored. There was no threat to my life I could not best, yet the various tools of carnage and terror so intimate to me could not bring my goals' fruition. Ingratiation enough to immerse myself into other cultures to study their lives was one of the hardest tasks I ever set. Doing so required cultivation of the good within, kindness, a friend's attentiveness, qualities that require practice and honing like any skill. Honing them made my past harder to reconcile. My haunt kept a tally of my good deeds, always asking if it was only evil held at bay until I had what I needed. Most of the magics from the first cultures I encountered I only know of from first-hand experience being cast out by them. Forest people whose priests were made of bark and leaf, capable of controlling and animating plants with flexibility and agility. A land where the unwanted cannot drink its waters. No matter my effort, I could not get it past my lips. Mountains made of cliffs and plateaus whose people could float into the air. Nomads with holy warriors capable of turning into birds of impossible size. After an unfortunate battle, they subdued and carried me far away at speeds I could scarcely believe possible. Across the world, they dropped me onto a frozen mountain. They were right to suspect the fall wouldn't be enough to kill me. While not dead, they did shatter bones throughout my body. Locals bearing tattoos and boasting impressive powers cared for me. They returned me to health, and when I learned their language, I discovered it was only to test me as an omen of good or ill. Taken to their wisest and strongest, I spoke to them in a room where I could not lie, and it revealed hidden meaning or truths. That chamber, in front of those tattooed warriors, was the first time I spoke with openness in my entire life. My story and mission were enough for them to reveal a great secret of their people, one I've sworn never to tell. It shattered my reality, but it was also the first glimpse of what I sought. Magic unlike anything I had ever seen. A shattered reality was a small price to pay for knowledge. Perhaps the reality they lived with was why they were the first people to hear my story, to understand my crimes against humanity, and say even I could find forgiveness. Perhaps what I witnessed was the first time I ever considered monsters greater than my family existed. I descended the mountains into a land embroiled in civil war. After learning what I could, I gave a good person my support to help them win and establish a new kingdom. Tyrants have reigned long enough. Once things settled, I witnessed the magic of their land. Near-perfect ore spawned deep within mines in a steady and so far limitless supply. While not every culture accepted me, this was the turning point where they began to. I found a self-sufficient city upon a desert oasis, hidden inside a sandstorm that kept ill-intentioned at bay. Every culture I studied taught me something beyond the capabilities of their magic. Perhaps the most informative was a federation, scores of diverse cultures united in peace for common prosperity. They achieved this by relying on the magics of a select few cultures spread throughout all their lands. An agrarian people whose every farm spawned a natural spring ensuring abundant food that kept famine at bay. Their magics turned a desert into an inland sea. The Federation communicated through another culture who birthed rare individuals capable of speaking to each other's minds no matter the distance. This allowed rapid mobilization in response to any crisis. The Federation's defense fell to a warrior culture known for embedding weapons into themselves. I have fought with them, and know even my father's elite would struggle to claim victory. Nowhere else in the world did such cooperation exist amongst so many peoples. It was a valuable glimpse into an alternative to seclusion or conquest. I traveled the world many times, my path forced from my choices often. Complications arose when my father discovered I still lived. Contingents led by my siblings hunted me. I dedicated considerable time and effort to stall his conquests. I worked with a culture who collapsed part of the world, creating a cliff hundreds of times the height of a man that stretched between mountains to the north and south, causing the greatest defeat the Empire had ever seen. The bulk of its army annihilated in a moment. Yet it was still too strong to challenge, so I resumed my quest, uncovering the source of magic. I have seen people walk upon molten rock, children walk through stone, societies commune with their beasts. Magics with no rhyme or reason or natural law they could not break. For centuries, I believed that magic resulted from the gods, but their pantheon held no commonalities to explain the universe. The magic was key, and I suspected it responsible for creating the gods, not the other way around. That is when I found it. Magic expresses itself in one of three ways: in the environment around a culture, through any individuals in a culture willing to alter their body for power, or through rare individuals who act as a conduit capable of reshaping the world. Most societies held a single expression of magic. Many held two, and any with three were rare to find, but always held astonishing sights. The spirit had been fading a long time when I found the land of the seer. When I discovered it, the haunt let go, left alone for the first time in I don't know how many centuries. I had never needed it more, stranded in a land much like the Empire. It was there, an entire civilization devoted to war, skilled at it, on a vast continent I knew intimately. I could have seized it by their own laws. The seed of an empire to rival my father's was mine to cultivate. Empire building necessitates atrocities. Resorting to that seemed base. Instead, I made myself a trophy to visit the great and powerful and gain access to their oracles. They revealed the next step of my journey. Humanity held little else to aid me. It was time I discover something predating humanity. They described a mountain range I knew from my travels, then gave directions to a cave in its heart that plunged into the depths of the world. They decreed I isolate there and consider all I have experienced. Luck saw ample land by the cave for me to farm. I built a home, a mere shack, to sleep and enjoy the light. Upon my orders, cities were dismantled, burned, and whatever remained buried with the bodies of its inhabitants. Even that effort seems like child's play compared to what I found. A city larger than any I have ever seen, built by either an insane mind or creatures anathema to us. Considering its builders used a mottled red and black stone I have only seen on the stationary moon in the north, I had to abandon any thought of human capacity or reason. I considered the possibilities. I inspected the city, the land above, the caves and soil between, and I could only conclude they had buried it with magic that kept it intact from the world's ever-shifting nature. With uncounted seasons behind me and still unable to figure out the puzzle, I abandoned the forsaken city and trekked north to find the closest point to the stationary moon. I climbed a lone mountain on a frigid peninsula near the tip of the world. There I meditated in the bloody light of the moon. Madness played a role in the puzzle's solution. Years of solitude, starvation, dehydration, stretches of time without sunlight or without darkness. Reality revealed itself to me. I fell inward, expanded outward, becoming nothing and everything. Despite fluency in almost all tongues of humanity, words cannot describe it. The interpretation my mind settled on was space filled with light as orbs, rivers, mist, and so much more. What we experience is the balance discovered by existence to build atop itself. Matter, gravity, time, chemistry, life, souls, everything is but an evolution of a mechanism determining the functioning of reality. The magic of our world is a means to help shape it. I cannot say it has will or intent guiding it, nor what it works towards, or even what the next stages are. When I touched those lights, understanding and mastery opened to me like a gate. Once I returned to my body, I felt a shift within. In my hands was a light, a shape I understood to be the fundamental expression of my essence. From it, a small sphere of light birthed into the world. I could return to the true workings of the universe at will. With every gate I unlocked, another tiny portion of existence entered my dominion. For every gate, a new light birthed into the world. I had succeeded. I had found the root of magic, mastered it, and now I held the greatest power humanity has ever seen. With it, I returned to my father's empire, now at its peak in might. I submitted myself to capture. Held in chains, surrounded by siblings old and new, I brought my might to bear, slew them all before my father, then slew him, finally proving his mortality. For generations, the populace has depended upon the stature of a living god at their head. The empire destroyed itself. My meddling ensured nothing remained. During the decades of eradicating the empire from the world, I continued my study into the raw magic I had tapped into. I held power to alter the world as I desired, yet the more I mastered, the clearer the veil of our universe became, a veil that was eroding. While the workings of the veil were beyond my understanding, I could measure its decline, and I saw through it. Monsters, demons, there is no word to do them justice. I touched their minds. I learned what I could, as did they. A horde of monstrosities from a previous incarnation of existence waits for the barrier to fall. Our universe is the first with the soul, the first with emotion more complex than the pride and anger and fear of self-awareness. They have visited this world before, the only ruin I ever found buried deep below, waiting to rise at their reclamation. It was humanity that began the cycle of erosion they trapped the world with. When a species capable of spawning magic in the world arises, they come and devour everything. The world resets, begins anew. Life complex enough for logic and understanding arises. It will always evolve, because that is the purpose of this universe. We are merely a feeding frenzy for an apex civilization. How many cycles our world has endured, I cannot know. How many millions or billions of years they have shackled us is unknown. I may have set out in my youth to master reality merely to slay my father and be free, but on my journey, I saw what humanity could be. I saw beauty beyond sight or sound or touch or taste or comprehension. I saw unity and harmony. I saw compassion, empathy, peace, love. I traveled the world once more, gathering the best of humanity from every culture. I taught them to unlock the gates of creation and wield its power. Through them, I smothered war across the world and forced peace upon all lands. Only my disciples wielded the magic, and through them, no army could stand before us, nor could famine or disease ravage humanity. The world entered a golden age of prosperity. But the veil thinned. I knew of a way to barricade it. The scourge you face is how I succeeded. I spent over 1,000 years searching for another way. Many times I attempted to gain the aid of others, but their end was always as a shell dominated by the monsters beyond. Revulsion delayed my hand too long. When the barrier collapsed, I was too slow. 8 mighty abominations made it through. They were enough to plunge the world into chaos and anarchy that turned 1,000 years of prosperity into myth. I have slain 7. 1 remains, and in its mind, I have seen new plans for our world. Extinction is beautiful by comparison. To prevent that fate, to keep the horror from unleashing foul machinations upon humanity, I have committed deeds that have no peer for cruelty by human hands. I once wondered during my time guiding the world's prosperity if I had redeemed myself. My haunt never returned to tell me. I'm glad it didn't. A moment approaches where outcomes are few, but fewer still are good for our species. I have fought Calamity and committed too much evil for too long to keep humanity safe, just to abandon it to even darker fates. I have groomed your people to stand as steward in my place. You will face this last demon in our world, and by destroying it, gain the right to choose how you keep humanity safe. Fail, and I will destroy the world and prevent life from ever taking root again. Prevention of the veil's collapse is the only salvation I shall ever want. My soul's annihilation at the end of my vigil, the only freedom I shall ever know.